Well, I grew up in a small town just outside of Philadelphia, and in my town, sports mattered a lot, especially basketball. It was the kind of town where our school gym class teachers always let the basketball section of the year go on for like twice as long as all the other sports. And clearly, the other sports were like not anywhere near as important. And I remember being really young and just realizing that, man, I really was not good at playing basketball. And I think I was in gym class in like the 3rd grade or something and just trying to shoot baskets and just like maybe missing 9/10 of them. And so it was really tough because I practiced and I tried really hard, but no matter what I did, I couldn't really get better at it. And the years went on and I continued trying and failing at getting better at playing basketball. And it was the first day of our middle school gym class, and I had just gotten chosen like pretty close to last on our sports team for all the various teams, and those were the teams that we would have to play with for the rest of our gym class session. And I felt really crappy. Like you can imagine, like any John Hughes movie or something, you know, getting chosen close to last in middle school makes you feel not that great. And I came home, and I remember my dad was sitting in the kitchen. He was home early that day, and he was making a sandwich, and he could tell that I wasn't feeling that great, so he asked me what was going on, and I was just like, well, you know, and I told him, like, I basically blew my shot at being, like, a cool middle schooler. This is not going to work out for me. I don't know what to do. And he was like, look, you know, I'm going to tell you a secret. It doesn't really matter that you're not good at playing basketball. You could be, like, basically the worst player in the world, and it wouldn't matter because you have other strengths, and you just need to figure out how to learn how to play to those strengths. And if you learn how to play to your strengths, then basketball won't matter. And so, of course, at the time, I probably responded with something like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know me or my life. But, of course, in hindsight, his point was spot on. While sometimes it can be really easy to focus on the things that we want to improve, we also need to really remember the importance of playing to our strengths. So, hi, I'm Jen. I work as a designer for a company called Awesome. We are working on building tools to make it easier for teams to communicate by letting technology take some of the overhead off of people's shoulders. I joined Awesome earlier this year, and I'm excited to share a little bit about our design thinking and the design process for one of our features. And because we knew we wanted to focus early on building communication tools for teams, we decided that initially we wanted to build something that focused on staying within Slack. So we built a bot, and it's called Awesome, and it comes from a future where technology works in service of people. But what does that mean exactly? Well, our starting point was to ask ourselves, what are we good at? Where do our strengths lie as people? And people are good at a lot of stuff, like conceptualizing, creating, inspiring. And then we asked ourselves, well, what are bots good at? And bots are good at stuff like monitoring, routing, aggregating, classifying. And you'll see that a lot of our strengths have to do with collaboration and creation, while bots' strengths have to do with things like organization and classification. And let's be honest, people are good at a lot of stuff. We didn't want to set out to build technology that replaces people. Instead, we wanted to build technology that helps take some of the annoying overhead off of people's shoulders so they can get back to doing the stuff that they really care about doing. We had to figure out what bot strengths are, even so that we could design tools to play for them, to design the tools to play to bot strengths. And it also doesn't hurt that a lot of the things that bots happen to be good at are often the things that we as people find pretty annoying. So because of this, we decided we didn't want to build a people and bot communication tool per se. Instead, Awesome would be the facilitator, the generous teammate that helps take some of those annoying tasks off of your plate to help you get more out of Slack. And Awesome is the behind-the-scenes assistant that ensures that your show goes off without a hitch. So think switchboard operator, not the person on the other end of the line. And we looked at things that bots are good at, and we started then tying those things to real use cases. We created a few features to help round out our initial beta. So the first of these is called Sidebars. So Sidebars are dedicated spaces in which to have focused discussions. Oh, and I had a GIF there, and I guess it's not going to play. So Using our imagination, you can invite your team members to join your conversation. You can set a goal for the conversation, and then once you're finished, Awesome will help you create a summary and then share that summary out with the rest of your team. And again, this is something that happens, all of these features are things that happen inside of Slack. And next, we created a feature called work logs, which are a simple / command that help you let your teammates know what you're working on. And, oh, it is showing. It just doesn't show on my screen. Okay. Well, that's good to know. So you can see an example of work logs here. And finally, highlights let you annotate noteworthy messages in real time in your feed as important or questions, decisions, or just plain awesome. So early one morning, following our beta launch, I stumbled into the office to chat with one of our users. His team is based in Europe, so I had the pleasure of speaking with him at around 8 in the morning. And I should probably mention I'm not a coffee person, so you can also safely assume that I am not a morning person either. But needless to say, our talk was going along as best as it could for 8 a.m. when he suddenly said, you know, I keep putting my updates in this thing, but when am I going to get something back? And that woke me up a bit more. And it struck me that Awesome wasn't really holding up its end of the bargain. We had successfully created a bunch of tools to help people create and organize content, but where was it going? Off into the great beyond somewhere? We needed to figure out a way to let people recall their content. So, yes. And because of the real-time and also somewhat ephemeral nature of Slack channels, we wanted this new feature to act more as a permanent system of record for all of the content that we were getting through Awesome. Slack had released its post feature a while back, so we figured why don't we start with that as a way to aggregate data. It allowed us to keep all of our content within the same location, aka on the same platform, and we could reference other users, and even better, it's indexable content. But for all of those rational decisions aside, on a fundamental level, it made sense because now we'd finally closed the loop on our content creation. Now all of these features finally had a place to live. So we built our new feature and we called it Recaps. Recaps let you roll up all of your team's sidebars, work logs, highlights into a single post. And these posts were users could choose to share them within a channel. Anyone within the team could create a recap for a channel or for another user, and when they did so, they'd see that previous week's worth of content aggregated into that post. We decided to release recaps initially to a small group of teams and then open it up to all of our teams on our beta, which was still at that point closed. And then, yes, and so then in addition to that, then following to add in new teams through our waitlist harvesting. And we thought to ourselves, well, this is going to be great. We're filling the other half of this content transaction. Our users will be so happy now that there's a clear purpose and a goal for the content that they've been creating. And we sat back and we waited to see how our users would respond. And as an aside, that's just kidding. Of course, we're not sitting back. We just shifted focus to work on some other stuff, but that's not really relevant to this talk. So we're going to leave that out. But what happened next? Did Awesome and our equally awesome users ride off into the digital sunset together? Well, kind of. When we first began thinking about use cases for recaps, one idea that came to mind was the weekly reflection meeting. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to generate a recap to help the team quickly and easily see all of the week's progress, questions, decisions? Another idea was how to make progress reviews for managers easier. So now all you would have to do is run a recap for your direct reports and you'd have all of their updates ready to go at your fingertips. And all of us on the team liked the idea of tying recaps to these real-life aspects of collaboration. And I know I wasn't fully expecting to see some crazy up and to the right mountain peak action, but I was at least hoping to see some positive signs that our teams had adopted this feature and were using it regularly. But when the numbers started coming in the first few weeks after we shipped recaps, we were faced with a bunch of meh. And meh as in, yeah, a few of these teams are using these, but not nearly as many as we had hoped, and not as frequently as we had hoped for either. So our starting point at this time was to take a closer look at our numbers as well as our hypotheses. And since we weren't sure exactly whether the low adoption numbers were caused from the feature itself and the design of the feature, or in the way in which we introduced that feature to our users, we started first by trying to simplify the way that we introduce recaps to our teams. Now, instead of limiting the number of teams with access, we opened up recaps to all of the current teams. And on top of that, we called it out as a special, very distinct feature within our new user onboarding flow. And next, we looked at the recaps themselves. Of the teams that were using them, we did see recurring usage on a regular repeating basis. Often this was just 1 or 2 times a week, which indicated that probably our weekly reflection meeting use case was valid on some level. So going off of this assumption, we then asked ourselves, okay, so what aspects of this could we further automate? And then that led to the question of what would happen if we gave people a better way a more easier way to schedule these recaps to recur on a weekly basis to coincide with these meetings. So since it felt like a relatively low risk decision, both from an engineering and a design standpoint, we decided to just go for it. We updated recaps and we allowed any new user who signed up through the new user onboarding flow at that point forward to be able to schedule weekly recaps, and they could do this per channel. We then prompted all of the teams to schedule. So again, we called it out very explicitly during our onboarding. And in the weeks since releasing this update, we've been fortunate to see our engagement numbers with our feature recaps increase. And though we don't have enough data yet to fully prove out this hypothesis of ours, we can at least say with some confidence that baking in a certain level of automation has definitely helped increase that usage of our feature. Not only with recaps, but also just in looking at the number of recurring teams that we're seeing week over week as well. And then where does this leave things for awesome? So we're continuing to design things and to build tools for teams to communicate, basically play to their strengths and allow us as people to play to ours. We're in a pretty exciting place, and I hope you'll keep following along with our story as that continues to unfold. And because I know this is kind of a lame conclusion, I'm going to leave you with this awesome GIF. Ta-da! Yay!